Before we get into this episode, I want to make sure that I share an exciting announcement with you. I am releasing a signature course called a Coherence course, and it's a signature program for a reason. It is the synthesis of everything I've gathered from over 2,000 coaching calls. I've got to be an insider and privy to the hopes, the dreams, the stumbling blocks, and the process of so many creative clients who are trying to move from hazy to clear about what's next for them. And I've distilled all that learning into a set of highly intentional steps and lessons that each have a exercise for you to take, as well as some real client case studies for you to learn from. I am really excited to be able to offer a more financially accessible option for people who might not be able to afford one-on-one coaching, or for those that just want some more flexibility and control when it comes to timing and pace. I'm offering it as a self-paced learning option, or you can actually join a cohort, which is a group of people who are also moving through it together. And I would be guiding you across 4 calls across 1 month. The first cohort kicks off in June, and I'm starting to accept applications. So whether you choose the self-paced or the cohort version, either way, you're going to wrap this course feeling a lot more clear about your next steps. That is my guarantee to you. I'm so confident about this that I'm offering a money-back guarantee. So if you invest in the course and you decide it's not what you thought it would be or hoped for, or not getting as much value out of it, you can just simply email me and ask for a refund. That is how much I believe that you are going to get something powerful from this. So if you have any questions about the course, you can just email me at hello@coherence.studio, and you can check out the course on my website. That is at coherence.studio/coherence-course. I really hope that you'll consider checking it out and giving it a little look, especially if you're someone who feels like, I know I'm uniquely good at something, I just can't wrap my head around how to talk about that, how to share that with other people, and I don't really know how to map that onto a next work and life chapter. I'm going to help you move from taking that big vision and really breaking it down into not only a 30, 60-day plan, but all the way up to today. Like, what action can you take today to get moving? So this is a boot camp of sorts to get you from feeling like a nebulous sense of like, I don't know what I'm doing and where I am, and what I'm good at and who I am anymore, to having really confident, strong, proud answers to all those questions. So go check that out. And in the meantime, I hope you'll enjoy this episode. Coherence is about making sense of things. It's about fitting different parts into a unified whole. And I would go further to say that it's not just about sense making, but it's about meaning making. I know that humans are constantly trying to make sense of the world, to create order. I see this every day with my 2-year-old daughter. She's constantly making connections, trying to link two things in the same category, sometimes in funny ways. And we do this naturally just to survive. The way I see it, finding order in the chaos of the world is sense making. But seeing what is actually significant, what is worth our attention, is meaning making. Today, I want to talk about the power of coherence. I'm going to break it down into 3 sections, which is really talking about a current crisis of collective coherence, like us as a society. Sense making is hard right now. The second is the skill of creating personal coherence for yourself. And the third is how we might envision healing as really like a story engine to power what comes next for us. Part 1, I named my business Coherence Studio. I actually heard about coherence in, I think, another podcast, someone breaking down sort of the 4 elements that kind of lead towards a meaningful life. And coherence really stood out to me because, I don't know, maybe as a cerebral person, I was just feeling like, oh, when something clicks in my head, then my body can follow. It's almost like I kind of need the sense making before I can let sort of that intuitiveness or that somatic knowing to follow. And I know for me, I've been asking that timeless question, what makes up a good life? What is the good life? Since I was in high school. And I was raised without any sort of religious or spiritual teaching. My parents, they did try to instill in me some kind of moral compass about what was a good way to treat other people and how to treat spaces, how to treat creatures. But I didn't have a grand unifying story about why something was good or bad. It was kind of just like, this is or this isn't. It's good to be kind. It's not good to hit people. My main understanding was really then through like cultural norms. Like, this is what we do, this is what's acceptable. And I know that those norms evolved because of an evolutionary reason. But I think I sometimes lamented that I wasn't raised believing in God because it seemed like a very helpful and convenient at times when I needed more hope or support to find resilience. In college, I studied the concept of community and particularly how online communities functioned. Like, was an online community just as valuable as an in person community? I read Robert Putnam's well known book, Bowling Alone, which was all about the loss of what some people call third spaces, which are it's not your home, it's not your work. It's this kind of like third place that you go to just kind of enjoy, to learn. But with declining participation in organized religion and community groups, I knew that, it was going to be a lot harder to find that place of connecting with people, of feeling like you're in community with people. And I think in some ways, like community and a connection with other people, and sometimes the central mission of that sort of became the substitute for that lack of that kind of unifying big story about why something, should be the way it is, like why I should ultimately make decisions. And when I found community, I really went for it. I ended up co founding my own third space. It was called New Women Space. And it was an attempt to create a place that wasn't the place where you spend your time making an income and feel a sense of belonging. A lot of the interest in community building for me was an interest in connection. And I realize now that the one thing that was lost with declining participation in third spaces was not just connection, but it was actually shared meaning. And specifically with, I think, religious institutions, churches, temples, mosques, anywhere that people come together for shared recitations, readings, practices, beliefs, songs. All of that really helps the people who attend to feel like the world kind of makes sense. There's a structure to why we do things and how we do things, and it has meaning because of the story. That story, I think, gives people a reason why. Why are things the way they are, and what are those guiding principles? So, what happens when we lose a sense of shared coherence and meaning? If we don't have a collective story to all believe in, and at the same time, our trust in our kind of elected officials and various people in power is just continued, I think, to crumble. So, if life has less order, predictability, and meaning, I think we are left open to be more susceptible to anxiety about the ambiguity of the future. And we don't have a sort of buoy of hope that a strong story, a strong, doesn't have to be religious, but that was just such a prominent place of delivery for so long. So if we don't have that hope, then we're kind of left out at sea. This weekend, I was listening to a podcast about how parents are conflicted about screen time for their kids. Some parents are embracing that this is just a way of life now, this is just happening, and others are trying to make more active measures to sort of lessen or prevent their kids from spending time on screens. And this conversation that centered around screen time, it soon became a conversation about shared moral frameworks. Like, in the absence of a shared moral framework, Parents are left to their own judgment to make decisions for their families around like what is meaningful, what is worthy of our attention. And the guest that was on the podcast being interviewed, Jonathan Haidt, he's the author of a best-selling book called The Anxious Generation: How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. This is a book that has stayed at the top of the best-selling list for a lot longer than most books. I think because it's, yeah, clearly such a relevant, top of mind conversation for a lot of parents. But it said that we can't really create a moral framework on our own. We have to do it collectively. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that sounds really hard to do. How do we create a new collective story about what makes a meaningful life? Right? Like, who's going to do that? What press outlet is going to sort of help shape and broadcast out what makes life meaningful? Or is it going to be, the Instagram, YouTube influencers who are going to create enough of a following to sort of get some sort of traction about like who's it going to be, and how do we reinforce a shared value set during a time when so many of us are afraid of speaking up too strongly with any kind of like moral assertion of something is right or wrong. Part two of this episode is about the skill of creating personal coherence. So, if you agree with me that today we have so many options for what to do and how to do it, but we have so few places to go for wisdom that we trust, we are at this cultural moment of feeling like the world we knew is just kind of quickly changing. And we're having to rapidly try to understand what to care about, how to spend our time, and how to find aliveness and creative vision amidst all of that change. My logic follows that if we don't have a strong shared sense of what makes life meaningful, then the next best thing I can think of is to learn how to develop our own beliefs about what makes life feel worth living and let that guide our ability to confidently make decisions. I would love for a great new movement to sweep the nation and really reset kind of culture and create a collective and sense of what makes a meaningful life. I think I would love that, but we don't have that right now. So if you think about that skill and how important it is to move forward in our lives, which is to decide what is valuable to me, we need to become those expert storytellers. And I don't just mean that in the sense that we need to become, very entertaining and learn the craft of storytelling for a very captive audience. I mean that we need to be able to form a sensible story for ourselves about who we are, what we want, and where we want to go next in order to not feel like constantly paralyzed by indecision. I really believe that the way that we move forward in our lives with confidence is to act in accordance to our coherent story. But we need that story and we need help forming that story. So, what I try to do with Coherent Studio is to help my clients unpack and integrate the various layers of storytelling in their life and to create a unified guiding narrative that will inform their actions about what to do next to build, I'm not going to go far to say their whole rest of their life, right? But just that next work in life chapter. One way to think about it is like an internal operating system, what you care about, what your habits are, strengths and weaknesses, and then applying that operating system onto your own protagonist narrative arc. So if you are the main character in your story, and I hope that you are, what do you need to do or learn in order to further the recurring themes of your life? So if you know anything about creative writing, the concept of themes comes up a lot for authors. They're thinking about what are the themes that I'm kind of infusing into my story. We as humans have these themes in our lives too. So as a coach, I am going to interview you in order to pull out those important data points. I need to know like enough about you, which we then later together help synthesize and find the patterns, spot the themes. I help you make those connections that you might not have been able to see on your own because you're just truly too close to yourself. And also, I think there's something to be said about saying things in a succinct amount of time and really seeing, therefore, like putting everything out on the table and making those connections easier. So I help you synthesize these multiple storylines into a unified signature story of sorts. And then we work together to apply that signature story to your future chapter. Again, it's really like being the author who already knows the characters and the plot lines and is trying to write the next most sensible and ideal chapter for the protagonist. It's like being the author who already knows the characters and the plot lines and is trying to write the next most sensible and ideal chapter for the protagonist. This past year, I took time to independently study the concept of adult development. I was just really interested in how adult humans change and transform over time, what forces and factors influence how someone moves their personal storyline forward. And adult development incorporates an understanding about someone's life stage. Are they in the exploration of their 20s, the sort of nest building stages of the 30s, a return to independence in the 40s or 50s? And it maps that onto where someone is in their own change cycle, or a cycle of transformation or transition. So, are you moving toward a goal? Are you shedding an old life chapter? Are you in the messy middle of not knowing what is next? Everyone has these core themes to their life that show up again and again, and they manifest a little differently each time. So, a thesis that is emerging from all this is that if we understand the themes of our life, and many of them are related to our values, and many of those are also related to core wounds of ours, then we can use those themes as strong clues about how to direct our own personal growth, how we want to evolve. Part 3, healing as the engine to power your personal evolution. It's really surprised me how the concept of healing has arrived into this emerging thesis. I really feel like healing is a concept that is much more tied to therapy in my mind than coaching, but arguably there can be a lot of healing with coaching. I think coaching really focuses on triumphing over constrictive, limiting beliefs in order to break patterns, to break the unconstructive patterns. The core wound or wounds can then actually be a guide for what direction someone needs to head in their next chapter. So, because a lot of the limiting beliefs are tied to those core wounds, some of the ways that we were hurt along the way, some things that we had to bear or witness, they translate into that limiting belief. So, let me give you an example, and this one is close to home. So, one of my core wounds, arguably my biggest one, is from growing up in a household with parents that were not in a loving and warm relationship. And so, when I was a young adult, I saw my parents' commitment to really like stay together for the kids as some kind of weakness. And I saw that their commitment to each other and keeping the family intact was the cause of a lot of dissatisfaction. And I think I put it together. I made that connection that to be committed to something is to risk being stuck in something painful. So in my 20s, I jumped around to a lot of jobs, partners, and apartments. I was constantly on the move. I lived in 5 apartments over 5 years during my time in Brooklyn. I had a new boyfriend and a different job every year and a half. And I ended up being quite worried that I was not going to be able to commit to anything. I know that working with a therapist and a coach myself, the theme of commitment did show up, and I saw how it tied to this painful element of my childhood. And if I were to project forward to what I needed to do to heal my relationship to commitment, I think an obvious answer would be to realize that I actually could commit to something and that commitment wasn't actually necessarily tied to being unhappy. So I might have worked with prompts like, what is a small thing I can commit to? Or reflecting on what have I actually already committed to in my life that has been a positive thing. Does this example help you better understand how an opportunity for healing is actually a life theme and how knowing your life themes can guide you to figure out what you need to create in your next future chapter? If we come back to the main idea that stories create coherence, I think we can look at where healing plays a role in common narrative arcs. So we can look to popular stories everywhere. There's so many themes, and not just themes, but themes in the narrative journey itself. So think of like the hero's journey, right? That's kind of a framework that you can kind of see expressed on a lot of different stories. So I wanted to kind of take healing and apply it to these character journey patterns and speculate on how they might translate and apply to your next work chapter. The first one is the wound gift transformation. So, in powerful stories, a character's deepest wound often becomes their greatest gift. Think of Harry Potter and his childhood trauma and how that gave him resilience against Voldemort. And you can think about Frodo in The Lord of the Rings. He has this burden of carrying the ring, but that actually develops into his incredible inner strength. So for me, I had another painful moment in life where I felt like I had been told I was so special by my mom growing up, but then I didn't really feel like I excelled or was uniquely and remarkably good at anything by the time I was applying to college. So I had a lot of pain in that disconnect of like, okay, I think I'm unique. I think I'm special at something, but all of these college entrance essays are asking me to write about that, and I don't know what to say, truthfully. So, what do I do now for my work? Well, I help other people see what they are uniquely good at, and I help them validate that they truly do have something special to share with the world. So, it's kind of neat how I transformed my own pain point, my own wound, into a gift, something that I could offer others. I think people can feel incredibly fulfilled when they transform something that hurt them into a way to contribute. So, for example, maybe someone who was dyslexic as a child and had ADHD, maybe they grow up to run a creativity school that's all about embracing many ways to do things. Or maybe there is an executive who was overlooked as a kid and becomes exceptional at spotting untapped talent in others. So, for your own wound gift identification, you might ask, what painful experiences have given you your unique insight or capabilities? And what would have lessened your own suffering during that time? What, like, solution, support, or service would have made you feel supported and tended to during that painful moment? The second character journey pattern is the return to an abandoned power. So many stories involve characters that reclaim abilities that they once gave up. Luke Skywalker, he reconnects with the Force that he initially rejected. Elsa in Frozen embraces powers that she once was afraid of and hid. When you apply this concept to your career, I think this often overlooks When you apply this to your career, this often looks like reclaiming talents or interests that you once gave up for practical reasons. So, my cousin Janet comes to mind, who I recently interviewed on the podcast. She was pressured into doing a more pragmatic path and chose to do law. And then later, she pivoted into becoming a children's book author and gave up her lawyer path. Another example might be someone who is doing an analytical job who secretly loves writing. They might evolve toward strategic communications, like threading some of their writing skills into their work. Or they might just give up analytics altogether and eventually decide to make their own books and become an author. For your own abandoned power inventory, you might ask yourself, what abilities or interests did you set aside that still call to you? The third character journey pattern is about integrating opposite forces. Healing in stories usually requires bringing together or integrating something that might seem contradictory inside of ourselves. So it's about integrating aspects of oneself. Bruce Banner, who's the Hulk, he learns how to integrate the Hulk rather than to suppress him. In the Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen balances her protectiveness with her vulnerability. Severus Snape's character in Harry Potter, he seems like he's a Death Eater, but he's secretly protecting Harry. And what makes his character so compelling is that he never really fully resolves into like this simple good guy, right? His healing comes through holding these contradictions. When we think about integrating opposite forces and how this can relate to our careers, this can look like someone who previously was compartmentalizing an aspect of their personality to start bringing that into their work. For example, I've had several clients who felt like they couldn't bring their more passionate creative selves into their more buttoned up corporate job. And one way to start integrating their life more would be to begin sharing and talking about their creative practice and life within their work conversations. Other examples of seemingly contradictory forces that can be brought together are like pairing leadership with collaboration or pairing expertise with continuous learning. And for your own integration opportunities, you might ask, where in your life are you trying to keep parts of yourself separate that might create something powerful if you combine them? The fourth character journey pattern is the completion of unfinished business. So that is when someone returns to resolve something that was left incomplete. And I know that sounds a little bit like what I just talked about with the return to abandoned power. I think that's more about like internal aspects that they gave up, things that they were interested in. This one is more like someone kind of returning to face some aspect of their past, heal and resolve a relationship. Like Simba in A Lion King, he returns to Pride Rock to face Scar and to face his past. We have Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happiness. He completes what his father couldn't. And I think when we can apply this to the work world, you can notice that some career transitions actually represent the completion of an abandoned endeavor or interrupted dreams. So maybe someone who left music to pursue business might be ready to reincorporate music in a new surprise way. Maybe they apply their business to their original love of music. Or someone who got burned in journalism and left might find healing by returning to a different newsroom with a very different work culture and getting to apply their journalism skills in a healthier setting. So, for your own unfinished business exploration, you might ask, is there anything that feels incomplete in your story? Something that you wish you had pursued or resolved? And lastly, the mentor becomes the guide. A really common healing arc is when a character uses their journey to help other people. So, Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, he learned karate through his own difficult journey, and then he becomes the guide who helps his protege, Daniel, kind of focus his anger into strength. I think the career application of this is pretty straightforward. Really, it's like finding healing by being the guide that you once needed. People who struggled with learning differences maybe become an educational innovator, creating tools that you wish you had had. Again, using me as an example, I am helping guide people to see how they are special after having wished that I had had someone like that to help me see that I was special in my early 20s or what was unique about me. So, for your own guide potential, you might ask, who could benefit from the wisdom of my particular journey? Who needs the guide that I could become? I hope that these examples of these common healing narrative arcs were interesting and ideally thought provoking. Maybe you now even have an idea about a painful part of your past that could serve as a clue to how to evolve your work. I know I covered a lot today, so I want to wrap up this 3-part episode and just review what I covered today. So if you think of like the shape of a funnel, starting with the widest part at the top and moving down to the narrowest point, I started at the top broadly with the current cultural moment where we lack this shared collective story about what makes life meaningful and how this lack of shared meaning actually makes it hard to know how to design a good life. I then moved into put forth that in the absence of this collective meaningful story, that we would greatly benefit by learning how to create our own personal meaning story. When you know your own coherent story, you have a guide to know how to direct your life forward. And this personal story is multi-layered. There's a lot of different facets to it that you need to pull in, but it's really taking the main themes of what you're good at, what you enjoy, and contextualizing them in your current life moment, and then understanding what personal growth direction you want to head. So that's kind of what brought me to the concept of healing as a main lens that you could apply to direct your personal growth. And I think if we look at the places within us that really need to be repaired or resolved, then we can find powerful clues about how to use our work as an engine to evolve as people. Ooh, okay. I am out of breath. I can hear it in my voice. It's a little froggy. I'm said enough for today, but that was a lot of conceptual connecting that we just did. I appreciate you traveling with me on this train of thought. And I hope that it encourages you to spend some time getting curious about the main themes of your own personal story and where you, the protagonist, are in your own narrative arc. If you want some extra help to think about your coherent story and really craft a narrative that you feel is just so true and authentic and compelling, I have a new course for you. And it's one I'm super excited about. It's a signature course, Coherence course, and it's designed to move you from this place of haziness to getting really crystal clear about who am I, what am I good at, what am I uniquely positioned to do, and how can I actually map that onto my life in practice? How do I take actual real action steps? There are two different ways to take the course. There's a self-paced and there's a cohort-based version. This course has really easy to follow exercises, templates, and systems to make a really resonant career shift and ultimately a life shift because work is such a huge part of how we spend our time and where we can find meaning and connection. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go to coherence.studio/coherence-course. And if you have any questions about the course, you're welcome to send me an email at hello@coherence.studio. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about it. It's something I've been working on for many, many months now. It's really a distillation of a lot of the exercises and topics that I cover in my one-on-one coaching. And I'm excited to offer this more accessible way to access this process and framework to help you build more coherence in your life because I think the notable price tag of one-on-one coaching just isn't doable for everybody. So I see this course as the way to make it financially accessible and also time accessible. It's something that you can do in the little pockets of the day at whatever speed that you want. I'm also always a big fan of learning as a group. And so our first cohorts kick off in June. And you can kind of be paired with a group of people that are also doing the exercises and digest with a set of peers that are all striving and trying to build coherence in their life. So you don't have to do it alone, but you could as well. I'm grateful for your time and attention and kind of hearing me out today. I think this process, this particular episode felt very helpful for me to write to just clarify my own thinking of like what is at the core of this? What is this belief? Because there can be a lot of coaches out there. There can be a lot of ideas around how do you get from point A to point B. But I hope that you can walk away from today understanding the power of storytelling, not only in our head, but what we say to other people and how that shapes our life. So make sure that the story that you're writing is the one that you're consciously choosing and is the most ideal and sensible for you. You get to write it. You're in the author seat. So make sure that you remember that you have that power. You can create an incredibly coherent life.